What's good, everyone, and welcome in to another 2021 NBA playoff live check-in here for the World Class Hoops podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rouse, coming to you from my hometown of Chicago, Illinois. And honestly, man, I'm not even gonna hold you, man. First things first, salute to Derrick Rose, one of my all-time favorite NBA players, number 2 behind Scottie Pippen. 10 years later, man, MVP in 2011, and here we are 10 years later, man. 26 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, man. Derrick Rose with a huge performance for the New York Knicks in yesterday's game as they beat the Atlanta Hawks to even the series up at a game apiece. Unfortunately, for New York, the win they had yesterday kind of marred more by the spitting incident on Trae Young. Trae Young was spit on while standing courtside. As a matter of fact, interesting enough, Derrick Rose was in that same clip, the one I saw on Twitter. And then also the Russell Westbrook incident with what happened in Philadelphia with the fan. A lot of fan incidents last night. A lot more than you would want anyway. You know, a lot more with players than you would want. I mean, which is none, of course. But, you know, just too many fan incidents last night. Russell Westbrook had the popcorn thrown at him. Trae Young spit on by a fan. So, I'm just going to jump into this, man. And let me say this. Look, don't get me wrong. I'm happy to see fans back in the buildings. I'm happy to see fans back in the arenas for playoff games. I will admit, man, Madison Square Garden has been lit, man. It's been fun watching games in New York, man, during these playoffs, man. Madison Square Garden, that's probably been the most fun environment I've seen so far in the playoffs. But once again, the protect our players, I see protect our players is trending on Twitter. But it's like, honestly, man, some of these fans, bro, it's like not gonna be happy till they end up in the Malice at the Palace too. I mean, like, I'm not saying I want to see that, but it's like, man, like, honestly, but it's like, you know, I don't know what else can be done other than, you know, I mean, I'm sure the NBA has extreme security measures, but even LeBron James said last night, man, hey, if it was the shoe was on the other foot, man, you know, the players would be in some major trouble if, say, Russell Westbrook actually did get up to the crowd and did something to that fan, or if Trae Young did feel that spit on his shoulder and turned around and did something to that fan. It's about just behaving, you know, basically behave like a civilized human being, basically. Just behave like a civilized human being. And the reason why I'm getting this out the way, I don't like ending shows on negative notes, so I'm gonna just get it out the way with this. But, you know, just disappointed, man. I'm disappointed in what I've seen so far from some of the fans. Like I said, I'm happy to see fans back in the building. It's a good look. I mean, that's part of the excitement of the NBA playoffs. But I just think, you know, you got to behave like a civilized human being. And I'm just disappointed with what we've seen with some of the fan interaction, or some of the fan. I don't even know what to call that, like interactions, engagement. Some of the fan behavior we've seen so far with the popcorn being thrown at Russell Westbrook, and then with the fans spitting on Trae Young. So just a bad look, especially considering, you know, this is the first time we get to really have fans back in the arena the way we've had it all season long. So just a bad look all around. All right, now that I've got that out the way, once again, this is the 2021 NBA playoff check-in here from the World Class Hoops podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rouse. You can catch me on Twitter and Instagram at KingRouse21, KINGROUSE21. World Class Hoops Podcast, available on Twitter at WCHP Media, Facebook at World Class Hoops Podcast, and available on Apple, Anchor, Google, Spotify, and YouTube. So be up to date with the latest content of the World Class Hoops Podcast as we continue to cover the 2021 NBA playoffs. So I already mentioned last night we had the fan incidents, but let's get back to the court. Let's bring it back to the hardwood here, man. That's what I'm here for. Last night, the game twos of the 2021 first round of the 2021 playoffs have concluded last night. Philadelphia going up 2-1 on the Washington Wizards. The Knicks evening the series at home against Atlanta, and then of course the Utah Jazz down 0-1 at the time to the 8 seeded Memphis Grizzlies. Get Donovan Mitchell back in the lineup, and they defeat the Memphis Grizzlies 141-129 to even that series. And I'm gonna actually start in Utah because I'm not going to lie to you, I fell asleep on that game. I fell asleep probably around the third quarter. But I knew Utah pretty much had it well in hand. I know Memphis came back, got it back to down 2 points or something like that. And then Utah had another big run. And then Memphis again made it close in the fourth. And then when Utah finally got on their run where they went back up double figures, I know they were up 17 that was the last thing I saw. Utah was up like 17 points. And that's when I nodded off. Shout out to Donovan Mitchell, man. Utah definitely missed him clearly. Remember, he was supposed to play in Game 1 of that series, but as a result of his ankle injury, which had kept him out for the end of the regular season, he was a late scratch, probably about 3 hours before the game. And then Utah was unable to get the win in Game 1, but he returned last night. They win Game 2. Big performance from him, but also even bigger performance from Rudy Gobert, man. 21 points I know he had. And it's interesting because, I've seen Utah this season, and I've watched Rudy Gobert. Not really one of the more reliable offensive threats, but he is a terror in the high pick and roll, which is one of the things that I think has really helped Utah get the top, help them get that top seed in the Western Conference. Is their high pick and roll. They play through him being Rudy Gobert with Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley, and then they spaced the floor with their shooting. Their shooting was not what they needed to be in Game 1, but they were able to knock down the 3 in Game 2, and I expect more of the same from Utah. I think this is an interesting series because, honestly, I see this series going 6 games, and I also think Memphis has an opportunity to steal it. I think, I remember when I was doing the preview, when the predictions for these series, I said Utah in 6. But this Memphis team, man, shout out Ja Morant. Like, another big game. 47, 50? I forgot how many he had exactly last night, but I think it was 47 last night in Game 2 against the Utah Jazz. The big game in Game 1, the big game against Golden State in the play-in tournament. And it's just really fun to see Ja Morant, man. Really, really playing well. Having an amazing series. With his scoring, his passing. Pretty much trying to will Memphis into it's really pretty much, man, trying to lead Memphis to that first round upset of the top seed Utah Jazz in the Western Conference. Dillon Brooks, big game in Game 1, not so much in Game 2. One of the big issues with Dillon Brooks throughout his career, at least in my opinion, has been his foul trouble, man. Like, I feel like for the last 2 seasons, I feel like he's been about a year away, but a big issue with Dillon Brooks has been his foul trouble. So if he can stay out of foul trouble and stay on the court, we saw what he can do. He showed in Game 1. He had 31 points helping Memphis win that one. So for Dillon Brooks moving forward, we'd like to see him stay out of foul trouble. But a huge game for Utah. They got a major spark out of Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. And honestly, this series, right up there with Knicks and Hawks, probably my favorite on the court series. Overall, I think Lakers-Phoenix is probably my overall favorite series just because of all the dramatics. You got the defending champions. Chris Paul is hurt. Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, Chris Paul. A lot of talented players in that series. Phoenix they've been getting good production, good performances out of people in that series, as have the Lakers, especially in Game 2 with the game Dennis Schroeder had. But I really think Utah and Memphis and probably New York, Atlanta. I think New York, Atlanta a little bit more so is probably my more favorite on the court series. But this is right up there with it. Utah and Memphis, in a weird way, is a bit of a clash in styles because you got that young Memphis team. I can't remember if they're either number 2 or they are the youngest team in the NBA overall. Definitely the youngest in the playoffs. But this Memphis team, it's like a clash of styles. You got a lot of guys that can get buckets. Ja Morant, Dillon Brooks. Meanwhile, with Utah, you see a lot more of let's play through each other. Like, don't get me wrong, Utah has their stars too, much like Memphis with Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert. You can even throw Bojan Bogdanovic in there if you would like to. He's been one of their top scorers. But Utah, the way they play, they play through a lot of high pick and roll. They space the floor and they like to shoot threes. It was working for them in Game 2, and that's how they ended up with the win last night. And honestly, I could see you now with Utah and Memphis. Like I said, I've got this series going 6. I could see them split into 2 games in Memphis. Game 3 will be a swing game. I'll get more into that as we get closer to it. But this Utah-Memphis series is right up there, man. One of my favorite on the court series, right next to the New York-Atlanta series, which I already talked about the Trae Young spitting incident. I'm gonna try to get away from the fan behavior. No place for that in an NBA arena. Like I said, act like civilized adults, man. It's like, behave like you would as if you spit on Trae Young, he could see you one-on-one. That might be my Chicago talking, but I'm just saying, behave accordingly. You know what I'm saying? Behave like a civilized adult. That's all I'm saying. But on the court, Atlanta, New York, been a very fun series. Game 1, I said I thought it was going to come down to some Trae Young heroics. Came down to a Trae Young floater. Big game for him in Game 1. He shut the Garden crowd up. Probably been the most entertaining player overall in this playoffs has been Trae Young, just because of his fan interaction. I even saw him talking to Spike Lee last night during the game between the Hawks and the Knicks when I think he was inbounding on the sideline, probably right before that spitting incident, actually, because he was in that same vicinity when I saw him talking to Spike Lee last night. But for the New York Knicks, and the reason why this Atlanta-New York series has probably been one of my favorite, it has been my favorite on the court series. Just a lot of the talent in this series, like Julius Randle, who has been struggling in his first playoffs, John Collins, Trae Young, and in New York, it's like the clash of styles. New York's half court, let's try to shut everybody down style of basketball versus Atlanta, a team that has a lot of shooters. But since Nate McMillan took over as interim coach, they too have kind of been embracing the half court style. And although I thought that kind of led to their downfall in game 2, there are a lot of talented players in the series. I mean, Derrick Rose, I already mentioned, 26 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. I'm not a Knicks fan. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a Knicks fan, even though I am happy for all the former Bulls like Tom Thibodeau, the head coach, Taj Gibson, Derrick Rose, a lot of former Bulls in his playoffs overall, including like Cameron Payne, who's been playing very well in that Phoenix Los Angeles Lakers series. But for the Knicks, the key for New York has been their guard play. Because Julius Randle, like I said, he's been struggling. I think 15 in both games. I know he had 15 last night. But Derrick Rose with the 26 in game 2. Alec Burks with a losing effort put up 27 in game 1. New York's guard play has been what's kept them afloat so far in this series. Derrick Rose and Alec Burks coming off the bench. It's just a matter of can they get Julius Randle back to where he was before the playoffs. When he ended, by the way, shout out to Julius Randle for winning Most Improved Player. But what got him the Most Improved Player of the Year? Atlanta has done a great job with Clint Capella, John Collins, Bojan Bogdanovic, defending him and making him have to defend, making him expend energy on the other end of the floor. That's something I think Atlanta has done very well. This is a series I think that could go 7 games. I said that when I predicted. I have Atlanta, New York going 7. And like I said, that 7th game can pretty much be like the first 2. It could come down to some Trae Young heroics, or it could come down to New York playing a great defensive game and getting great production out of the guards off the bench like Derrick Rose, Emmanuel Quickley, Alec Burks. It could come down to Julius Randle having a big game. This is easily the most fun series I've been watching on the floor. You know, Atlanta, in terms of just pure basketball, Atlanta, New York has been the most fun series to watch, followed by Utah, Memphis, just because of the performances we've seen in those 2 series. So once again, another entertaining night, but for Atlanta, New York, I'm expecting it to go 7, man. And the key so far has been the guard play for New York. Like I said, the production from Derrick Rose, Alec Burks. Can Julius Randle give the New York Knicks what they need as the series shifts to Atlanta? And New York, man, I mean, it was a party in New York last night. I saw all the pictures and videos on Twitter on 7th Avenue. The Knicks, after the Knicks won they got their first playoff win in 8 years. Like I've said many times in the past, man, basketball is most fun to me when the Bulls, obvious reasons, Philadelphia, Sixers, Lakers, and the Knicks. When those 5 teams are good, to me, the NBA is just more fun. And it's good to have all but the one I really want, the Bulls, being pretty good and playing in the playoffs. But happy to see Madison Square Garden, host some NBA playoff basketball for the New York Knicks. It's been fun so far. And lastly, the Philadelphia 76ers, Washington Wizards. I will admit, Philadelphia, I thought this series would be a little tougher for them in the first 2 games. Now I picked this series to go 7. I picked them to win in 7. I picked the Sixers. But through these first 2 games, it appears that it's been all Philadelphia. In reality, that was only the case in game 2. We know Russell Westbrook left the game last night with an apparent injury before the popcorn incident. But also in this series, Philadelphia, they're really getting... Their 3-point shooting was the X factor for me entering this series. And on top of that, they've been getting great performances out of who you need them from. Tobias Harris with a career playoff high in game 1, 39 points. And then the outside shooting of Danny Green and Seth Curry, who so far through this series both have 4 3-pointers apiece through 2 games. You'd like to see a little bit more, but pretty good look so far in playoff basketball where the game tends to slow down a little bit more. And Philadelphia with 2 at least in game 2, a very convincing win, 120-95. They've really done a good job of shutting down Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook. I mean, they've been, all season long, I thought Bradley Beal, early on he was an MVP candidate. Russell Westbrook, I mean, triple-double king, always got to watch out for him. But Philadelphia so far, they've just controlled the Washington Wizards in this series. However, as this series shifts to the nation's capital, I expect to see a much different series. I expect to see Westbrook and Beal sort of getting more involved in terms of scoring. Also expect to see more out of guys like Davis Bertans. And also for Washington, I would like to see them kind of go maybe bring Bertans into the starting lineup. They've been starting kind of small in the series. I know they went with Russell Westbrook, Bradley Beal, and Raul Neto going with that 3-guard look. Kind of would like to see them start Davis Bertans. At least put a little bit more pressure on Philadelphia to make either Tobias Harris or Joel Embiid have to defend. And I understand like why Washington is starting Alex Len, because you have to go up against Joel Embiid, so you have to keep him from just getting to the rim. So I understand why Alex Len is starting, but if I had to make an adjustment, if there was an adjustment I would like to see for Washington, would like to see them start Davis Bertans, get some of his floor spacing out there early, and try to cause some problems for that Philadelphia team. Make the Sixers shoot. Make Philadelphia shoot. Like I said, they've added Seth Curry, so they've added more shooting. They've got Furkan Korkmaz. They've got Danny Green, who's had his playoff struggles in the past. But I think the key for Washington in this series is, can they score? Like, can you make Philadelphia have to defend at all 5 positions? And I think so far they've struggled doing that with Rui Hachimura, and then also going with the 3-guard lineups. I think maybe if you put Hachimura out there with Bertans and Alex Len, now Philadelphia, they do have a bit of a dilemma. It's like, do you put Tobias Harris? Where do you put Tobias Harris? Is he guarding Hachimura? Is he guarding Bertans on the perimeter? Do you keep Joel Embiid in the paint to guard Alex Len? What do you do with Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal? With Ben Simmons, do you put him on Beal or Westbrook? I think Washington, maybe by putting Bertans in the lineup, could make Doc Rivers have to think a little bit, make him run, make him go through some things a little bit, make him readjust some things in terms of defensive matchups. If maybe they put Bertans' floor spacing and 3-point shooting in the starting lineup. All right, so those were last night's games. Let's move into today. Later tonight, there'll be a couple of game 3s. First, it will be the Milwaukee Bucks at the Miami Heat. That will be followed by the Los Angeles Lakers at the Phoenix Suns, and then the Portland Trail Blazers will take on the Denver Nuggets. Before we get into those 3 games, though, I would like to talk about my pick to win the Western Conference, the Los Angeles Clippers. The LA Clippers, down right now 2-0 against the Dallas Mavericks in that first round series. And I said coming into that series, hey, man, I'm a little nervous about picking the Clippers to win the West, because I think Dallas can take them to 7 games. And I can't lie to you, right now it looks like the Clippers are about to get clipped in the first round. And honestly, if I looking at this series, the key for me in this series not only has been Luka Doncic and his incredible play. I mean, he's just going crazy with the step backs. I think he had like 8 of them in game. I swear I counted like 8 in game 1. Just step back 30-footers, step back 20-footers, just a number of step backs in game 1. It continued in game 2. But for the Clippers, man, the ultimate team with their back to the wall right now in these playoffs, because they're down 0-2. They're headed to Dallas for games 3 and 4. And honestly, I really don't have a quick fix for the Clippers. Like I mean, Paul George had a very good ball game. He had a very good ball game in game 2, including the move where he crossed up Kristaps Porzingis. But this Dallas Mavericks team, they're just playing too good right now. They're getting performances out of everyone in their lineup. Tim Hardaway Jr., who's been coming off the bench in this series, has been playing pretty good. And then on top of that, I'm sorry, not Hardaway Jr. Dallas is it's either Hardaway or Finney Smith, one of the two. I think it is Hardaway coming off the bench. But, I mean, Dallas getting a lot of great performances. I'm sorry, Jalen Brunson off the bench. The positional size they have in their starting lineup with Luka Doncic, Tim Hardaway Jr., Dorian Finney-Smith. And then when you look at the Clippers, it just seems like the Clippers are kind of compromised defensively. Patrick Beverley is a very good defender, but we know he's been dealing with injuries. And Luka Doncic is pretty much he's just been using his size on him, much like the rest of this Dallas lineup. On top of that, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. It's like, I saw Kawhi guarding Luka late in the ball game. Let's see if Kawhi guards him the rest of the series. But it's for the Clippers, it's going to take more than one game to fix this. Is what it looks like, because they're down 0-2. It's like, man, can you win game 3 to buy yourself some time to really make some adjustments going into that 4th game? They're struggling. They're not getting good performances off the bench. I mean, Rondo had a good game in game 1 where he had 11. And then in game 1, also for the Clippers, when they tried to play the half-court style, when they were giving the ball to Ibaka, trying to back down against some of the Mavericks defenders, interior defenders, Clippers just weren't making their outside shots. So now for the Clippers, the question is, what can you do? Like, Dallas is really just playing well. Really, Dallas is really having they're just having an amazing time so far in this playoffs, knocking down threes. And for the Clippers moving forward, I mean, Kawhi Leonard is having he's having great performances. Paul George had a good game in game 2. It's really going to come down to defensive adjustments for this Clippers team, how they combat that positional size of the Dallas Mavericks. And then not only that, Dallas's bench is just outplaying the Clippers with Jalen Brunson, Tim Hardaway Jr. I can't remember if I feel like he came off the bench in game 1 and started game 2. I can't remember exactly how that went, but Tim Hardaway, he's been playing he hit the big shot that I thought was the dagger in game 2 the other night when he hit the angle 3. And Dallas, they're just in control of this series. I'm not saying it's over. I'm not going to say it's over until it's actually over because, like I said, I picked the Clippers to win the West. But it does not look good right now for the LA Clippers, man. And another thing for me that really kind of bothers me, considering things I mentioned about this series, I'm just like, I said the positional size and the struggles that the Clippers have had off the bench. And all I can think is, man, the Clippers sure could use Lou Williams right now. And that's all I can think. All I can think is, man, I wish they would have kept Lou Williams. They really could use Lou Williams' scoring right now to offset some of that positional size in that Dallas lineup. Somebody that can get you buckets on the second unit and someone you can interchange with the starters like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Reggie Jackson is there as well, as is Rondo. But at the same time, Dallas with the positional size and also Rondo, who we know has had his struggles shooting from 3 throughout his career. They haven't been able to really take advantage of some of those advantages against the Dallas Mavericks. So moving forward, I think for the Clippers, they have to get more out of their bench going into the 2 games in Dallas. Also, they've got to figure out something defensively. Wouldn't be surprised to see the Clippers actually try to play smaller. Maybe you'll see a Reggie Jackson in a Patrick Beverly lineup out there with Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and maybe Serge Ibaka just to space the floor a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see that going into games 3 and 4. But right now, I mean, much credit to the Dallas Mavericks. It's not, in game 1, some of the blame fell on Paul George and all of that because of the 8 of 18, the pandemic P jokes that go on for the playoffs. But he played very good in game 2. So right now, and to see him play good in game 2 and Dallas still win that game almost pretty handedly, it's looking a little dark for the LA Clippers. Looking a little tough for them as the series shifts to Dallas, but I think there's still a little hope. It's not over till it's over, but right now, Dallas just playing amazing playoff basketball. All right, later tonight, let's preview tonight's ball games, game 3s, all around the board. Milwaukee at Miami, Lakers at Suns, and then Denver at Portland. Milwaukee, Miami, I picked Milwaukee just like I picked Brooklyn, who's on that same side of the bracket. I picked Milwaukee and Brooklyn to both win their series in 5. The matchup I thought would be the Eastern Conference Finals early on throughout the season until Philadelphia took over and became the top team in the East. Actually, they've been at the top all season as well. I don't know. This is a tough one because I feel like Milwaukee one of 2 things is going to happen. Either Milwaukee's going to go up 3-0 or Milwaukee's going to struggle because of the traveling. The key for me in this game tonight, I think, is going to be the 3-point shooting again for the Bucks. It's pretty much Milwaukee's 3-point shooting. Milwaukee struggled from 3 in game 1, and it came down to a Chris Middleton game winner. Milwaukee did not struggle at all from 3 in game 2. Shout out to Bryn Forbes, who had an amazing game, especially in that first half. He was lighting up the scoreboard in game 2 against Miami. And I think that's really what it's going to come down to for pretty much the rest of the series. Milwaukee's 3-point shooting. Miami, like I said coming in, I think Miami's just going to wear down because of the long trek through the bubble last year. Also another season full of injuries. Oladipo's out after having a surgery, and they're just wearing. I think Miami's just wearing down right now. Also, Bam Adebayo not having a good playoffs, not having a good couple of games to start off the playoffs. But one thing about Miami that I think will always keep them in it is the 3-point shooting. I mean, you got an elite shooter in Duncan Robinson. You have Tyler Hero, even Kendrick Nunn. Shout out to him out of Chicago. Another guy that can come out there and give you some defense, also can give you some buckets. But I just think Milwaukee, man, the way they're shooting, they look like they're on a mission. The way they're playing, they look like they're on a mission. They remember who knocked them out of the playoffs last year, and it looks like Milwaukee, they're like, hey, man, we got to make up for last year. It looks like they're atoning for that. So game 3 is interesting. I'm going to pick Milwaukee to win game 3. I think Miami does win a game at home in this series. Just not sure if it's going to be. I'm going to give them game 4, much like I'm going to probably do with Boston when that series shifts. As that series shifts there for games 3 and 4. I think Miami wins game 4 of that series, but I got Milwaukee. I got Milwaukee winning game 3 tonight. I think it comes down to the 3-point shooting. I'm not expecting Bryn Forbes to light it up. Maybe the same. Look for maybe a DiVincenzo or Pat Connaughton, or maybe even Chris Middleton or Giannis. Giannis hit the 3 early in game 2 that got Milwaukee started. But I think it comes down. I think the rest of the series will come down to Milwaukee's 3-point shooting, and I think Milwaukee will carry it over here in game 3, and they'll go up 3-0. And I think we might see Miami win game 4 to force the gentleman's sweep. So I got Milwaukee winning game 3. The X factor being Milwaukee's 3-point shooting. Lakers and Suns, I got that next, but I actually want to finish with that. So I'm gonna go Blazers. I'll go Blazers Nuggets. Denver and Portland. Another series that I said can go 6 games. I picked Denver to win this series, but looking at the series, it's really interesting. It's like I said, game 1, Portland won. But it felt like Denver had a shot. It was like Denver kind of, Denver was down like 5 minutes with 5 points with like 5 minutes left in game 1. And it was kind of like, I hate to say a team gave up, but it's kind of like they kind of conceded. They conceded game 1. Like, all right, down 0-1. Let's play game 2. And they came out in game 2. They won a big 20-point blowout. Shout out to Damian Lillard, one of my favorite players ever. One of my all-time favorite players. I remember when he came into the league out of Weber State. He had a big game in that first half, but I think Denver was just too strong. They got a great performance out of Michael Porter Jr. The real X factor for me as this series progresses, early on it was Michael Porter Jr. and Norman Powell. For me, the X factor in this series has shifted to Monte Morris for the Denver Nuggets. Monte Morris has had 2 very impressive games in this series. His scoring in game 1 against Enes Kanter, and then his scoring in game 2, his ability to be a floor general, his ability to play in a 2-man game with Nikola Jokic, something that Denver they sorely need with Jamal Murray out with the torn ACL. And I think Monte Morris, he's a huge X factor in this series for the Denver Nuggets. I'm not gonna say that he's gonna swing the whole series to Denver, but so far, I think he's been the X factor for them in this series, considering the performance they had out of Michael Porter Jr. in game 1 where he had 21, but he struggled from 3. Aaron Gordon, who's been guarding Damian Lillard, so sort of taking some of that burden away from Monte Morris by putting a bigger defender on Damian Lillard. Also, Denver, big credit to Michael Malone after what he did after the first half of game 2, where he switched Facundo Campazzo off of Damian Lillard and he went to Shaq Harrison. So here's a one of those rare moments where depth in terms of having bodies is proven to be big. Denver with a number of defensive looks that they can give the Portland Trail Blazers with Shaq Harrison, Campazzo, Aaron Gordon. I don't know what they're doing with PJ Dozier in the series. He hasn't played yet, but maybe you could throw him, another guy that's 6'7", who used to play for Windy City, who we had at Windy City last season, that you can put on Damian Lillard on the perimeter. Just put some size out there to make it tough for him to hit shots. So I think Denver, with their depth in terms of bodies that they can put on Damian Lillard, and with Monte Morris and the points that he's been getting, the scoring and the floor general, and being a floor general to being a point guard, playing in a 2-man game with Jokic, his performance has been huge for Denver. His contribution has been huge for the Nuggets. And honestly, I think Denver carries it over. I think they win game 3 tonight. But I think right now the X factor for them has been, 1, Monte Morris, and 2, the depth and having bodies that they can put on Damian Lillard just to show him different looks. For Portland in game 3, CJ McCollum. It's got to be CJ McCollum. I know, look, I watched every second of game 2. CJ McCollum numerically played very well. I saw he had 21 points. I think he went like 9 of 12 or 9 of 13 or something like that from the field. But the 2 functioning eyes was not impressed with CJ. It was not CJ McCollum's day, man. Let's just say it wasn't CJ McCollum's day. And I remember the game he had a couple years ago where he sent Denver home in game 7. But in game 2, I mean, it just visually was just not his best day. I mean, Monte Morris hit him with the step back jumper. I think Michael Porter stripped him of the ball out near the half court line, and then he got dunked on. I can't remember who got the dunk, but I want to say it was Porter, but I feel like that's wrong. It was either Porter or Gordon that got the dunk on him and the foul. And then I know he got nutmegged. Like somebody passed the ball through his legs that resulted into an easy layup. It just was a rough day for CJ McCollum visually. So let's see how he bounces back in game 2 and game 3. Norman Powell, that's another one. I thought he would be key for Portland. With the looks he can give them in terms of, guarding, pretty much Monte Morris, and also his ability to help score for this Portland team. You know, when he was in Toronto, I thought he was a guy that was kind of like a de facto closer sometimes, where he would take some of the last shots for the Raptors down the stretch of ball games, or he'd be the guy they would draw plays for at the end of games to try to sort of create offense for the entire team because his ability to drive to the basket, sometimes hit the outside shot. So I like to see more out of both he and CJ, Norman Powell and CJ McCollum, but more so CJ McCollum. I thought his game game 2, I thought he kind of. I mean, like I said, I can't say he had a bad game when I see the stats, but visually it just didn't look good. So it's really weird, man. So I think C.J. McCollum and also Monte Morris and Denver's depth, those will be the keys the rest of this series. I picked Denver to win Game 3 tonight. But I think this series, man, I said it would end in 6. Now I'm starting to think, man, this might go 7. We could very well see this one end up going 7, but I think we see the Nuggets take Game 3 later tonight. And before I get into Lakers Suns, first off, I just got the report that the fan who spit on Trae Young last night, he has now been banned from Madison Square Garden. So those fans have been banned. So there you go. I started this off talking about, hey, be a civilized adult, and there you see. So that fan has now been banned from Madison Square Garden. And so that's a good sign, though. That's exactly what you like to see. We saw the NBA player speak out last night with LeBron James saying, hey, protect our players. Russell Westbrook said the same thing. Players need to be protected, and I totally agree. I mean, to me, that's no different than, being at your job and somebody, pretty much what happened with Malice at the Palace, being at your job and somebody throwing something at you. And then, one of two things is going to happen, man. It's like, and what do you think is going to happen if you throw something at somebody? You think they're just going to, or you spit on somebody, they're just going to take it and be cool with it? Like, come on, man. So what do you expect to happen? I think that's a great response by Madison Square Garden and the NBA, to get that fan banned for spitting on Trae Young. So I like to see something like that. Just try to clean that stuff up. Like I said, act civilized, man. It's the NBA playoffs. We're all happy to have fans back in the building. We're happy to have fans back in the building. It's a good sight. It's a good look, but not if you're gonna have those type of things happen. You're gonna have conduct detrimental to the NBA playoffs. You don't want to see that type of stuff going on. So that's a good sign right there. And lastly, like I said, the Los Angeles Lakers and the Phoenix Suns. The Lakers and the Suns, Game 3 of that series tonight at Staples Center. As the series shifts to Los Angeles, tied at a game apiece. Phoenix with an impressive Game 1 win sparked by the defense of DeAndre Ayton and his performance on the offensive end, as well as the big performance from Devin Booker, who had 34 points. And then the Lakers in Game 2, their win sparked pretty much by Dennis Schroeder. Dennis Schroeder had a much better Game 2, and he made some key adjustments for the Lakers. I remember in Game 1, I thought what Dennis Schroeder did very well in Game 1 was he was doing a good job of getting to the free throw line, but when he was getting there, he was leaving a lot of points there. I know he shot 3 of 6 from the free throw line in Game 1. Phoenix did a great job of guarding Anthony Davis with DeAndre Ayton individually, either forcing him baseline on back-to-basket situations or just simply crowding his airspace on face-ups. Also, Phoenix's perimeter defenders in Game 1 did a great job of knowing when to help. There was a few times where you would see somebody on Phoenix. I remember Devin Booker exactly. I can't remember who he left. But he left his man and he doubled Anthony Davis and almost just took the ball, literally just ripped the ball out of his arms. And then the Lakers recovered and they tried to make a cross-court pass to turn into a turnover. For Phoenix, can they keep that same energy? Can they bring some of that same energy back from Game 1? I thought the issue for Phoenix in Game 2, other than the obvious, which I'm going to bring up in a moment, was Mikal Bridges, one of the guys on Phoenix who I named, along with Cameron Johnson and Jay Crowder, some of those other guys on the Suns. Mikal Bridges has had a rough series, and that's tough for the Suns because they really need his floor spacing to shoot against the Los Angeles Lakers. He's usually their corner stay guy. The guy they kind of use when they run the high pick and roll. He's usually the guy either in the left corner or right corner. Jay Crowder, everything he gives you on the defensive end, which I think we're seeing Miami is sorely missing him in that series against Milwaukee. But everything he gives you on the defensive end and also his floor spacing, his ability to shoot at the top of the key. He too had a struggle. He struggled in Game 2. I think he was like 0 for 5, 0 for 4, 0 for 5 before he hit that 4-point play in Game 2. That 3 that was a 4-point play. And Cameron Johnson, he's been playing pretty good as well. But for Phoenix, they need all the production they can get out of those guys. Bridges, Crowder, Cameron Johnson, Cameron Payne. Cameron Payne played very good in game 1 before he got ejected. In game 2, I thought he played good too. His energy level was high. He just was a little off with the outside shooting. But for the Phoenix Suns in this series, it comes down to Chris Paul, man. It comes down to Chris Paul's health, unfortunately. And I said on social media, man, I hate to see it, bro. I hate to see it for Chris Paul with this particular Phoenix Suns team. And the reason why I say this particular Suns team is because I think this Suns team is stacked. I mean, you look at Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton. And then on top of that, Chris Paul having an MVP caliber season. Chris Paul just being Chris Paul. You know, the point guard, the floor general that he is. And for Phoenix to be the number 2 seed in a season where, honestly, I really do think the West is a toss-up this year. Just because I think Utah, they're still dealing with Donovan Mitchell's injury. Memphis is the youngest team in the playoffs. Dallas is playing very good right now. Hard to pick any flaws with them, but we'll see how they go. Hard to really find any flaws with them other than their defense, which is other than playing the 127, 121 high scoring shootout games. How do they play against a team that plays half court basketball? You know, that's a little bit better in the half court. That's probably my only knock on Dallas. Denver's without Jamal Murray. Portland's been shaky nights on a night-to-night basis. See games 1 and 2. The Lakers have been wearing down. You know, the Lakers have been wearing down due to injuries in their trek through the playoffs, but they're still the defending champion Lakers. And for the Phoenix Suns in this series, they're going to need Chris Paul. Chris Paul in game 2, I thought it was very courageous he stepped on the floor, but you can see that shoulder is really bothering him. I remember we had one play in the second half. He had a high pick and roll. He tried to pass, and you can just tell he just doesn't have the zip on those passes that he normally would on the high pick and roll, which is really hurting Phoenix, because it's really messing up their timing on a lot of those plays where through the high pick and roll, Chris Paul can zip a pass to a Mikal Bridges, Cameron Johnson, Cameron Payne, Jay Crowder, Dario Saric, guys that knock down outside shots, and he can't deliver the ball in the split second timing that he really needs to in order for those guys to knock down those shots. And then on top of that, as I mentioned earlier, some of those guys have been struggling as it is anyway. So and then when you watch Chris Paul on his own jump shots, I mean, he always had a bit of a weird jumper anyway, kind of with the way he shoots from behind his head. But just watching him shoot, he's almost sidearming a lot of these. Like, you know, some of the baseball people will get it. You know, some of those 3/4 sidearm relievers. Chris Paul's jump shot almost kind of looks like that a little bit. In this, at least that's the way it looked at the end of game 1 and the way it's looked in game 2. So Chris Paul's health is the key X factor in this series for the Phoenix Suns, going up against this defending champion Los Angeles Lakers team, who, like I said, coming in, I picked the Suns in 7. But, I mean, without a healthy Chris Paul, it's going to be an uphill battle. It's going to be tough. The Lakers looked like they finally got their rhythm now in game 2. They played much better in the half court. Anthony Davis has struggled in this series. I mean, and a lot of that can be credited to DeAndre Ayton. But I think what the Lakers did very well in game 2, they finally did go to some of the other guys in that rotation. LeBron James is LeBron James. He stepped it up huge down the stretch to kind of hit some of those daggers for the Lakers. But I thought throughout the key throughout game 2 was Dennis Schroeder. Dennis Schroeder played very well. And I thought I didn't think Dennis Schroeder in game 2 was forcing it. I thought in game 1 he was forcing a little bit, trying to draw fouls, get to the free throw line, you know, basically doing what the Lakers do when they're trailing the game. They try to draw fouls, play half-court basketball, settle the game down, take the fun out of it, take the air out of the ball, you know, make you play a grinded out, all about execution style of basketball. I thought in game 2, Dennis Schroeder said, you know what, I can do that, but instead of trying to draw fouls, let me just try to finish some of these. And I thought he did that a lot better. Like I said, I already mentioned LeBron James. I mean, we saw the clip of him telling KCP, "Hey, shoot, KCP, shoot." And I mean, hey, it's hard to disagree with LeBron, because I think that's one of my keys for the Lakers in tonight's game. Maybe see more of that, playing small with like LeBron, Anthony Davis. See LeBron and Anthony Davis out there with Dennis Schroeder, Alex Caruso, Wesley Matthews, KCP, Kyle Kuzma. I like to see the Lakers kind of go more with kind of those 7 core of guys. Not that Andre Drummond can't play in this series, because I thought he had a much better game 2 than he did in game 1. But I think the better look for the Lakers going up against Phoenix, because Phoenix right now without Chris Paul, they pretty much are trying to beat the Lakers with a lot of fast-paced up and down basketball, trying to outshoot the Lakers a little bit. So I think the Lakers a good way to offset that. Maybe go a little bit smaller, with Anthony Davis and LeBron James, space the floor, and then if you feel like, hey, maybe the shots aren't working, that's when you go to Andre Drummond, and then you bring it back to that half court style of basketball where you make it about execution. And then with a guy like Andre Drummond, you're ending possessions because in my opinion, the best rebounder in the NBA, considering he's won 4 of the last 5 rebound titles up until this season when Clint Capella won it for Atlanta. So I think Andre Drummond, I think he'd be more of a key for the Lakers when they go into the half court style of basketball. But my key for the Lakers moving forward, I'd like to see them play a little bit smaller. I mean, I know Montrezl Harrell, I think he kind of fell out of the rotation in game 2 a little bit, but I'd expect to see him back into it, especially if the Lakers go small, just to get some of that, just to get some of his energy and his hustle on the court as well. So I think I would like to see the Lakers. I think the key for the Lakers, the X factor for game 3, maybe see them play a little bit smaller and then use Andre Drummond. So basically Frank Vogel. I think Frank Vogel is the X factor in this one. His rotations, his lineups, how he combats what Phoenix is trying to do, which is adjust not only to the Lakers but also the injury they're dealing with Chris Paul dealing with his shoulder. All right, man, so that's another check-in here for the World Class Hoop. This has been another World Class Hoops podcast, 2021 NBA Playoffs live check-in here on Facebook. Remember, you can catch the World Class Hoops podcast on Twitter at WCHP Media, here on Facebook at World Class Hoops Podcast if you're not already tuned in. Also, if you're listening via Anchor, Apple, Google, Spotify, or YouTube, you can listen via Anchor, Apple, Google, Spotify, or YouTube. And if you're listening, you can catch us here on Facebook at World Class Hoops Podcast. Also, catch some of my other shows like Students of the Game, available on Twitter at SOTG Chicago, Facebook at Students of the Game Chicago. We will have SOTG 142 later tonight on the Facebook page about 8:30 p.m. later tonight, so tune in for that. Also, our new morning show, Joe with Joe, airs on the Students of the Game pages as well. The Art of the Science, the boxing show, hosted by my good buddy Justin Adams. You can catch that on Twitter at ARTOFSCI Boxing, on Facebook at the Art of the Science. And remember, man, we got content, man. We got plenty of content, man. So feel free to check in. Feel free to continue checking in here with the World Class Hoops podcast. Remember, 3 NBA playoff games later tonight. I'll be checking those out. I'll be tuning in to see what happens in those, as well as also feel free to tune in to Students of the Game when we air that later tonight. So plenty of content on the way, man, within our group. So, be on the lookout for that. But until then, man, this has been another 2021 NBA playoff check-in. I'm your host, Chris Rouse. You can catch me on Twitter, Instagram at KingRouse21, KINGROUSE21. Until next time, man, enjoy the NBA playoffs, man. It's been pretty fun. It's been pretty fun so far, man. I'm happy to be watching playoff basketball. I hope you're enjoying it as well, man. So until next time, man, positive energy to you guys. Stay safe out there, and I hope you enjoy your day, man. It's a little cool here in Chicago, man. So I think indoors is gonna be the spot for me, man. I mean, we went from 92 last week to 59 right now. So that's that Chicago weather, man. So I think I'm gonna be indoors all day, man. Checking out some of the NBA playoffs action, just checking out sports, man. So be on the lookout. So until next time, man, you all have a good one, man. This has been another presentation of the World Class Hoops podcast.